Hi, everyone. It's Bonnie Burkert, and you are listening to and watching Truth Be Told Transformation. I'm here to share the tools for transformation to live your highest truth. And it's such a pleasure to find many wise speakers to join me for this show. And often I've invited people that I've been working with for years, but it's my true pleasure today to introduce somebody that I'm just now discovering, and I'm going to bring on Sadhu Dah.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
Hi, Sadhu. So you are a man of many, many disciplines. And so I just want to ask the question, how oftentimes it is said that you should maybe stick to one path and learn it well versus the divergent paths. You, however, are really immersed in both Eastern and Western traditions, many of which are also really intense and more sophisticated than I've really come across. So let's talk a little bit about you and the Thai Buddhist magic. What is that?
So the first thing that we need to understand when it comes to Thai Buddhist magic is that it's not actually Buddhist. And that's where a lot of people will kind of get mixed up, as they assume that because it comes from Thailand and it's heavily practiced within the elements of Theravada or Thai Buddhism, that it belongs to that path. However, it's actually much older than that. So if we look at Siam, which is now modern day Thailand, you had a lot of animistic practices and sympathetic magic, use of fetish objects and things of that nature. So think of a lot of indigenous cultures and their spiritual practices. Pre-14th century, this is mainly what the now Thai people practice, but it was also very common in Cambodia and in like other areas like Burma. And so we had this mixture of cultures that came together, and they had these different practices. The Burmese would practice what was called nat worship. So you would have coconuts that would have a spirit that was usually ascribed, and these were usually humans that have passed on, and their spiritual vessel is then contained inside of this coconut. And so people would pray to these coconuts, and that was nat worship. And then you had elements of that got blended with some of the older forms of Cambodian magic, and using like Pali, which is the language of Cambodia, but is also spoken in northern Thailand, to make what are known as like the Fa Yant or the Yantra tattoos. Like I think Angelina's tattoo on her back. So that's a perfect example of a Yant tattoo, and they're magic spells for certain purposes. So we have all these different interesting things that coalesce together to form this type of magic. Now, in the 14th century, when Buddhism was brought into Thailand and it started to integrate as the main religion, a lot of people didn't want to let go of their old traditions. So they became blended and woven together. And that's why we have some practices like the Hun Peon, which is a spiritual robot guardian. And it is normally made from like straw and like bits of clay or sticks. And it's kind of like the in ceremonial magic, we talk about servitors and egregores, basically just living energy that has a protective purpose. And this is the Thai version of that. We can get more in depth, but give me some direction here.
Yeah, that's great. No, and that's very detailed. So I'd like to ask you how you came into this, because you're not from Thailand, are you?
No, I'm not. I'm,
So
I'm
why don't
actually
we
African and Mexican.
So why don't we start a little bit about how that tradition, and you're from the States, correct? You're from the
Yes.
U.S., and so maybe because you really went deep on your learnings of that from that region. So did it start there? Was your spiritual awakening around this investigation, and perhaps you can tell us if it was a practice, or did it start with Buddhism, or were you brought up with other traditions that had you open to learn more about than pursuing more about Eastern and specifically Thai?
So to give you the short run of it, It first began when I was very young. My abuela is a curandera, so she is a white witch and curanderismo of traditional Mexican folk magic. And when I was really young, I would see my grandmother do lumpia, which is like using an egg to draw out toxins or sickness, or curses and spirits and things from a person's body. And I remember not really understanding it at that point in my life, but it kind of it opened my mind a bit. And then when I got older, it was in my late teens. That was when I went to a Buddhist temple, and it was not necessarily because I wanted to know about Buddhism or that I was seeking to learn meditation or anything like that. I was just curious because there was this big temple in Killeen, Texas, out in the middle of nowhere, and I wanted to know more about it. And that was when I met Master Thanaful Pakti, who became one of my main masters in the beginning of my training. But before I actually started to seriously train with him, I had ended up moving at one point, and I had an experience that brought me under the tutelage of a lama, of Bonpo tradition, so Tibetan Buddhism. And that man saved my life. I went on a paranormal investigation case because I was very curious about the paranormal at the time, had some experiences in childhood, so kind of wanted to get a little more into it. And it was when I witnessed, my first possession of somebody and getting, this mind-blowing reality of like, okay, there's way more going on than what appears from day-to-day reality. And then I started to train under him. And then Master Thanaful came back into my life, and then I began training under him. And then I ended up going back to Texas and joined a Wicca coven and was studying under, Mother Charlita, who was our coven mother. And I ended up training with Dr. Wilson Young, who is a Mao Shan Taoist priest. And I just kind of found myself left and right meeting other teachers. And this is where the diversity of paths started kind of blending. So some people may say, okay, well, you've taken different paths. Yes and no. Though different forms of Buddhism have variations of practices and how they approach things, there's still kind of like, it's like a current, right? So we have different spectrums on that current, but it's the same current. And you learn how to ride that current, that it doesn't matter where you are because you know how to surf and flow through that current. The eternal Tao, as we say. That really helped me with blending Taoist practices. That helped me with my Qigong. And then later I found with like the ceremonial magic, I mean, they were literally, in like the Wicca that I learned, it's just earth magic. And you apply a little bit of sympathetic magic principles to it, and it translates into Thai traditions very easily, seamlessly, even if you know what you're doing.
Well, that's really great. Thank you for tying that all in, because I know in my own mind I was trying to figure it out, but I think that ultimately you're right. It is about that, the ultimate energy, the Tao, right? Is that how we may, I mean, if we can bring it to a Western word, an English word. And, one of the ways after our initial conversation, I kind of tapped into a term that you had said to me about internal energy cultivation. And one of my goals for the show is to always have a tool. And for people, people may not be able to learn the sophisticated practices that you do and deal with. I mean, you basically said a demonic possession. And we were talking about the movie The Exorcist before taping here, and it was, it's creepy. It definitely is. And I could go there. And yet, speaking with you, I really feel that you are a light worker, just like some of the yogis we bring in, and you just have different areas of specialization. So I think that's great. And let's go back to that conversation about energy, Sadhu. Are there some basic practices you'd like to share to introduce people to that?
Yes. So there is one particular method that I believe is absolutely essential for my own well-being and cultivation of energy every day. And so I take it into a 3-step process. Um, I don't know if any of your viewers or you are familiar with the Wim Hof method.
I've heard of it only. I've never practiced.
Okay, so a short explanation of that is you take 30 deep breaths. So you'll breathe in into the belly and out through the chest. So you're gonna do 30 of those back to back to back. After the 30th breath, you have a full exhale and you have a timer going for 1 minute. You want to hold fully exhaled, not breathing in at all. So just hold the exhaled breath for 1 minute. Now, if you can't manage the full minute, that's okay. You can take a breath in, then exhale, and then just keep holding. But we want to try to get through, that whole minute as much as we can. So after that minute's up, then you're going to do it again, the exact same 30 breaths. Then you're going to do a minute and a half with the breath retention. And then you're going to do the 30 breaths again, and then you'll do another minute and a half. So we're doing 3 rounds of this. And in between each round, you have a recovery breath. So before we go back into the breathing, you're going to take a deep breath in, and you're actually going to hold that breath for 15 seconds, exhale, and then that's the start of your next round of breathing. So that's the Wim Hof method. This is hyperoxygenating our body. This is really good for immuno recovery, for delivering a lot of blood flow to various organs, the brain. I mean, there's a lot of science that backs why this actually works in helping people get over a cold, and helping literally heal the scar tissue and damage that's done when PTSD occurs in the brain. We can actually rewrite the neurology with techniques like this. So that's step 2 of the process. That's a 3-step process that I'll give you.
Thank you.
So the first process is you're going to want, and this is going to suck. This is going to really suck. You're going to want to take a cold shower for a minute.
A minute. I mean, I'll do it, but I'll do it for about 15 seconds and think
that's okay. If that's
think
all
I'm
you
brave.
can last is 15 seconds, that's fine. You can try to work your way up to a minute. One of my teachers, he does this every day, just like I do. And he only lasts 15, 20 seconds on a good day. And that's fine. That's okay. But you want to get it mainly. You want to get the cold water on the torso. We really want the torso to get hit with the cold water.
Okay.
So you don't have to completely submerge yourself, but at least let the water hit your chest. And if that's too much for you, the alternative is have really cold water and get your hands really wet in the cold water and splash it all over your face. You want to get that shudder response down your spine and a little bit of that shake in your body.
Okay.
What this is actually doing is it's telling the subconscious mind that you're experiencing death. So then the unconscious and the subconscious, without the conscious mind being aware, go through the entire cycle from beginning to end of actual death. So your body and brain will experience the cycle of death. And then when we do the Wim Hof, so the second part of it, then we're bringing that life force back, bringing that life force into our body. And then the third part is what's called Snake Swallows Moon. It's a Qigong set.
Okay.
And that one, I'll send you a video that you can share in the link of this episode that'll walk people through how to do Snake Swallows Moon. It takes 4 minutes, but me trying to explain every move, we don't have time for that.
Right.
But
thank you.
That's something that would be very helpful. It's a 3-step process, and I promise it'll change your life if you do it.
And so did you say that's Qigong?
Qigong. People also in the Chinese spelling or pronunciation will say Qigong.
Qigong.
Both are correct.
All right. No, I'm ready. Okay. Hey, I have my new daily practice thanks to you. With
It's
the,
wonderful.
I'll do my homework because I definitely think the breathing is all. So, at what point did you figure out these tools for yourself? Because it sounds like you kind of got thrown into this and really had to, and took on some crazy energy and really had to sink or swim in terms of understanding an entity, basically, right? We don't have to go into all the details. I mean, I invite people to look at Sadhu's site, and he will, for more stories on his background, his backstory here. But at what point did you figure out these tools, these physical tools, these physiological tools for yourself?
I had to start learning them pretty early on,
Okay.
because when you start crossing the threshold into the metaphysical, the magical, the paranormal, the spiritual, whatever you want to call it, the other dynamic of life that we often aren't connected to consciously. When you start to swim in those waters, think of it as you're taking away a life preserver. And if you don't know how to swim, you're not a strong swimmer, you will drown. You can lose your mind. You can go crazy. Literally has happened to me before in early parts of my training. There's a lot of dangers inherent with it. And I don't say that to scare people off or to lead them to not be interested in exploring those aspects of life. But I say this more as a cautionary tale of somebody who has experience there. And knowing that having a solid practice, one of the most important things that you're going to want to learn in the very beginning is grounding. Everybody wants to fly. Everybody wants to see spirits. They want to feel energy. They want to travel to other dimensions consciously. They want all of these mind-blowing experiences. But what they don't realize is you're dividing yourself. You're dividing your energy. What if you could experience all of that in a grounded and rooted way that is comfortable, not painful, not scary, depending on what you're doing. You get into some really weird stuff. It's kind of scary no matter what. But if you're grounded and you have a solid comprehension of how to maintain the vessel that is your body with this engineering of cultivating chi and knowing how to work with the energies, it's going to take you so much further. You'll be able to do so much more, and you'll be learning at a comfortable pace. And I was blessed enough that my teachers in the beginning really instilled the importance of these practices. I learned some really cool, weird stuff, and I got to see a lot of wild things. But I also had teachers that were there to keep me grounded the whole time, so I didn't screw up, even though I did on my own.
What a blessing. Yes, thank goodness for our teachers. Indeed. So now we talked about at the beginning, you were saying how Buddhism, I asked you about the definition of Thai Buddhist magic, and you said that Buddhism, it is not in fact Buddhism. So let's talk a little bit about, I know I took a quote from you that Buddhism is a spiritual science. So I feel like that's partially what you're talking about here, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Oh, okay. So this
So,
is
okay.
a happy topic.
For example, right? The fetish objects to repel animals, such as a hun peon, we mentioned like this little straw figure that is used for protection. So imagine you have a village that's getting attacked by a tiger, and it's coming out and it preys on people at night. And so these villagers, they have limited means of protecting themselves. They might be able to come out with torches, but maybe that's not quick enough and a child gets snatched. This is life or death. It's not in every place of the world as it is where we might be comfortable in places like the States. We don't have to worry about tigers coming out in your neighborhood and like snatching you off in the middle of the night. You live in rural parts of, Asia, and you might be dealing with like wildlife, or in Africa, or even if you're living in the Appalachians or something here in America, like you might have to worry about bobcats and things like that. So because of the dangers of wildlife, you have these spiritual masters, these teachers who learn how to cultivate energies. And this is all, this is very logical. At first, we might see it as like, okay, this little straw figure is able to repel a tiger. That doesn't make any sense. That's ludicrous. Well, the fetish object that repels an animal such as a hunpeon for tiger repelling works because the morphogenic field of every individual villager who is in rapport with the hunpeon creates a self-reinforcing morphogenic resonance. And that is a repellent to the animal in question. All the people focusing their energy into the hunpeon, creating a scary bubble that the tiger doesn't want to go in. So think of this as this monk or this spiritual master has taken this object and he's put thought and intention into it. He's ascribed into the vibration of it what its purpose is. And the other people collectively are also funneling that attention and focus into this object. So then this object kind of has its own ripple. And that ripple meets or oversees things that are in collusion with that ripple or not. So the tiger, this being to repel a tiger, obviously it's going to bounce with that ripple and then it's not going to want to be part of it. And I have one of my notes here that will explain for those who are more Western minded how this magic makes sense, how this is real.
Okay.
So the scientific foundations of non-physical manifestation. Experiment 1, we had Vladimir Poponin, I believe it was pronounced, and he proved human DNA can affect the photons around it, meaning that human DNA can affect light particles. E equals mc squared. All matter is light. So matter can be manipulated. And that's our DNA able to manipulate that matter. So this is, helping to explain how we're able to conduct such powerful magic and why it actually scientifically makes sense. And the experiment 2 is the US military proved non-locality. And that was by separating DNA, and that DNA can be affected when separate from the host. And it measures the response even if it's not attached. So this is kind of like how we can have something taken away from a person, whether it be, blood, various different organs, etc. And it could be subjected to, shock or, pleasure. And then the chemical responses and the neurofeedback of the individual who's separate from that part of their body or the substance from their body will measure a response. So this tells us that, like, when there's Tibetan monks will do this thing where they'll chant mantras and they'll take the spit from underneath their tongue, this pure meridian point, and they'll touch that spit onto an object. So it's highly charged. Wow. So they can actually influence an object with their spit. The experiment 2 is explaining to you why that is actually smart, possible, and logical, and what it means as far as what we can do with it. And then the last experiment 3, the Institute of Heart Math. Check out their website, look them up.
Sure.
Lots of really cool stuff. Mm-hmm. They proved that the human heart is a powerful electromagnet capable of interacting non-locally with the quantum field. This explains how we can do, remote healing, how we can transmit chi and influence other people with that chi, that energy.
Oh my gosh. I love all of it. I mean, this is each one of those experiments could be its own show. That's for sure. No, it's great. All right. So I'm still processing, but I'm going to go back to one question that came to mind. But even though there are so many that have since been conjured. So let's go back to the tiger and the statue, right? So okay. It's talisman, if you will, right?
Yeah, the hunpeon, yes.
So can we do that without the hunpeon? Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Can we do it without? I mean, clearly we can, but I'm just curious because when you go back to a symbol, I mean, we see these in cultures all over the world. I mean, right? You've got totems, totem poles, right? You've got, you talked about the Mexican folklore, and Day of the Dead, right? The shrines that we
Yes.
have and the energies that we put around those things. So let's just talk about, are we still using those talisman, or are we as people changing that we don't need those tools? Are we as people becoming more sophisticated that we don't
Well,
need the tools?
these things are thousands of years old. This is like what I'm talking about is, literally one of the oldest forms of magic.
Hmm.
And it works. It's very, very powerful. And what's interesting about it is, yes, you can achieve that same effect like with the Hun Peon without the Hun Peon. The only difference is you have to know how to internally create that same response, and anchor that response into reality. So bridging from the quantum mind, through the fourth dimension and from the astral plane, coalescing together in this geometric fractal shape to bridge it from your own heart space and your ajna chakra and manifest it. Now, for a lot of people, that just sounds like jargon. Essentially, what I'm saying is the focus on the Hun Peon and the different elements that go into building it and making it, because it's a whole process, right? We don't just take straw and then say this is a Hun Peon. There's mantras, holy prayers. There's certain auspicious days that are used for creating certain things. There's a whole process. And all the steps of that process, what they're doing is they're placeholders for mental energies. It's basically saying, step one, this thought, this feeling is aligned here. Step two, this thought, this feeling is aligned here. And then so on and so on and so on till you have this energetic shape, if you will. And that shape and that frequency is then implanted into an object, which becomes the placeholder. The fetish object then is emitting what the brain and the body has been marking and mapping. And if you know how to mark it and map it without the object, yes, you could definitely do it without the object. You don't need the object. But the reason why using the object is a lot more helpful and easier for people is because they might not know how to hold multiple place markers consciously and super consciously to create and construct something in such a complex way within more than one dimension of travel. We're getting into like some complicated sciences. So it would make sense that we want to have some way to simplify it, and having an object that can contain all that work and then is active and producing that effect without you having to constantly tap into it or project it. It makes sense. So to answer your question, yes, you can do it without it. And you could even make it more powerful, for being honest. But are you able to, do you know how? And if it's simpler to use, the object, then why wouldn't you do that?
Right, and a process as well. So I'd like to tap into your status as a high priest in the Wiccan tradition. I'd love to kind of have some compare and contrast between Eastern and Western. Any comments on that?
So one of the higher level techniques that you can learn in Wiccan traditions is the cone of power. Some might be familiar with that term. So when we're looking at Eastern and Western traditions blending, what you have to look at is what relationally lines up. We talk about a lot of God and goddess work in Wicca. It's a huge staple of the Wiccan foundation, of like when we do spells, whether it be candle spells, various different types of earth magic. Usually there's some sort of deity that's involved within that ritual, and energy is directed, received, or prayed to with that entity of a god or goddess-like category that we're working with. Now, what's happening here in an Eastern sense is you're just tapping into a vibration, and you're drawing on a manifestation of what's familiar that makes it personable, that allows you to connect. A lot of people are not going to like to hear this, but the gods and goddesses that they worship and that they have these images of and that they might have had real experiences with, they don't look like that at all. The ancient Vedics, when they made these like thankas and tapestries and these mandalas, and they would have, you know, these gods and these goddesses, this was a focal point of meditation. Is literally what it was. It was to personify and make something human so that it was something we could connect with, but it's this vast formless current of energy. So to make it accessible, we had to make it relatable. And when you work with some of these gods and these deities, that's why you'll have like, let's say Aphrodite and Lakshmi, and you know, these different gods and goddesses from various different traditions all over the world. There's a lot of similarities between some of them.
Right.
And that's because they're all different faces of the same current. One that'll blow your mind. Yahweh of the Abrahamic traditions, modern day Christianity and Judaic practices. Okay, so what we call the Christian God, Yahweh, is the same coin but a different face as Allah in Muslim traditions.
Yeah.
They're the same being. You're just seeing two different sides of a coin that's the same coin.
It's all coming together. It's all coming together here. It's fascinating. It really is, and it's coming together in terms of in terms of world religions, as well as then specific. Again, I use the word tools. These rituals, talismans, and other practices that you use. So it's really interesting. So, did I read correctly that you are a lama?
Yes, I was initiated into the Bonpo lineage.
Tell us a little bit about that experience. I've never met a lama before.
Very, very weird introduction. So she is now kind of like retired, and she's kind of living, you know, she's in her late 80s at this point, and she's kind of like living a pretty low key life right now. So I give her anonymity, but she's pretty world famous. And when I first met her, it was with another teacher of mine, and he's also a lama. But this woman, she was kind of like, how do you put it? So let's say you have like a professional skateboarder, right? So clearly above any amateur, you know, they're playing in the pro field. But then you have like a Tony Hawk, you know, some icon that we know, like very famous, and even among professionals, he's like a higher grade. So this lama that I had met with this other lama, so the female lama who initiated me, she was like a Tony Hawk. She was like, you know, next level status. And the other lama that I was training with, while still, you know, very incredibly powerful and humble human being with so much to teach and give, he was humbling himself to this master just the same as I was. And that was also kind of quite a lesson in humility to see as well, because for a while I'd hero worshipped this individual until I kind of got broken of that habit. But when we went and we studied underneath her, the most mind-blowing thing that I've taken from all of that was just being in her presence and what it felt like. It was intoxicating bliss. You wouldn't feel hungry. You wouldn't even think about using the bathroom. Nothing really mattered. You just were in a constant state of bliss and ecstasy. And it was pure. It wasn't too much. It wasn't like being high. It was very clean. It's hard to explain, but just being around her was intoxicating. She didn't even have to touch you. You could be like, you know, several feet away from her, but it was like you were contained inside of a reality bubble of her energy, which was so powerful and moving and motivating, and just the closest thing to a saint and divinity in a human body that I have ever experienced in my entire life. I mean, this woman to me was literally a living goddess. I can't explain to you what it felt like just to be in her presence.
Oh, what a great, great experience for you. And was it long ago? Do you still?
This was, I want to say, about 6 years ago now.
Great. And but we still feel the resonance when you describe her, and it's great. And you bring that. You continue to project that to us. We thank you, Sadhu. Hey, talk to us a little bit about meditation. I heard an interesting talk and your point of view on meditation. We all struggle with that sitting silently and kind of the specifics around it. So maybe you'd like to open that up for us a little more.
Well, I have people that come to me for meditation classes, and it's hilarious because I'll teach them how to meditate within less than an hour, and they'll be experiencing like waking states of samadhi, higher levels of consciousness. And they'll be like, holy crap, was it really that easy the whole time? And I'm like, yeah, you're overcomplicating things. But there's two things that have to happen first. When we think of the sitting meditation, that's an advanced form of meditation. That's not going to come naturally for most people, and you shouldn't try. Try with something simpler. You don't run before you learn how to walk. So this is like the very same. We can meditate while moving the body, even while our eyes are open, while we're fully engaged in motion. We can meditate. This is what Bodhidharma taught when he was teaching Qigong. And that's basically yoga meets martial arts, if we're breaking it down. And what I typically tell people is, if you want the most potency from meditation and to learn it efficiently, two prerequisites have to happen first. We need to remove blocks. Those blocks are what? Trauma. Okay. So we need to do some trauma healing. Once we do trauma healing, then the sky's the limit. We no longer have things weighing us down. Then we can take the next step. And that next step would be, doing practices like Simha Kriya or Chit Chakti. There's different like pranayam and breathing meditations. I love breath work. Breath work is incredibly important. So let's say we do some trauma healing, and then you did the cold water shock, then you did the Wim Hof, and then you did the snake swallows moon. I will bet my reputation that you will fly into a higher state of consciousness doing it one time. And I state my reputation on that because I know it works. I know these techniques work. I've proven it more than once for myself and for other people. So I very much so believe in that. And if it's not working, there's a block. Heal the trauma, the block will remove. Other states of consciousness will open themselves up to you. So to answer that meditation question, heal your trauma and do the cold shock, Wim Hof, and snake swallows moon qigong set, and you're good. That's all you need.
So no, that's great. Thank you. And I mean, it sounds simple. You make it sound quite simple, but let's talk a little bit. I mean, I feel like the healing of trauma, that may not be as easy for some. And now this is something that you do, right? One of the services you offer if people are interested in working with you. So I don't know if you'd like to touch on that a bit. Tell us a little.
Yes. So a lot of what I do is in the healing regards, I use essentially 4 different modalities that will often kind of blend together. I'll do traditional soul retrieval. So we're taking the fractured version of somebody's multidimensional body, and we're bringing that fractured version back into the subconscious, and then we're taking that disassociated, fractured subconscious part and integrating it into the present self by going back consciously to the memory or event that happened and giving healing and sustenance that it didn't have at that moment to then create a change in the present self. So I use trauma regression hypnotherapy and metaphysical, like soul retrieval. It's still very scientific, but some people, they like the flair of what they don't understand. Anyways, I also use pranic healing, and sometimes Reiki, but I prefer to use my own energy because I have lineage ties with my energy. So like all the masters and monks that have put power in me, when I channel my energy, that will flow, the lineage will flow through me. So very, very powerful energy that I use to heal other people. And then I use mantra saturation as well, where I chant and I put people into a state of trance with my voice, and I start doing healing work on their body and their mind, literally just using tone. But if somebody wanted something accessible, because I know that not everybody can afford me or will necessarily have the time to set up a session with me, something that you can use is called neurogenic reprocessing. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not.
Okay, so I also like to call it the nickname my teacher gave it, which is called spinning. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on a feeling in our body.
Okay.
And we'll identify where that feeling lives. And then we're going to touch that part of our body where that feeling lives, and we're going to give it a color. First color that comes to mind. So let's say I'm feeling a little bit anxious. Well, where does that anxiety live in my body? It lives right here in my shoulder. Okay, well, what color is that anxiety? I'd say it's like a muddy yellow. So now this is the second part. We're engaging our imagination, and we're engaging the subconscious mind, really, is what we're actually doing. So we're going to pull out all that muddy yellow from my shoulder, all this anxiety. So get it all in front of me. So once I feel like I got all that muddy yellow out of my shoulder, I'll hold it in front of me like a little ball, like a basketball.
Right.
And then I notice the direction that it's spinning in. Follow your intuition. Mm-hmm. So I noticed that it's spinning counterclockwise, and I like that direction, but I'm going to go ahead and stop the flow. And then you're going to spin it rapidly. So you're getting your whole body involved, right?
Okay.
A minimum of 60 times, and you got to really get into it. And as you're spinning it and spinning it and spinning it, let it go wildly out of control until it'll never spin in the opposite direction ever again, or keep tremendously spinning it in the direction you want it to go.
Okay.
And then we slam it back into our body where we took it out. Deep breath in, exhale, Let it integrate. So the simple explanation of that is you're taking the feeling, you're finding where it lives in the body, you're then physically engaging and touching that part of your body, you're giving it a color, then you're going to remove it. If you want to give it a shape, a temperature, a weight, you can also do that. It helps to build the metaphor, but all we really need is the color and the feeling. If you can't get that visual or imaginative with it, you pull all of it out, you notice the direction it's spinning in, you stop the flow, and then if you like the direction it's spinning in, you'll spin it in that direction. And then if you don't like it, you'll spin it in the opposite direction. We can use this to turn down feelings of depression. And this is literally, you're rewriting your neurology. I encourage people to do this multiple times a day, as many times as they want. The more you do it, the more substantial of a change. You're rewriting subconscious programs. And it's cool because your subconscious is aware of it. And that doesn't matter, because it's just like rewriting a computer programming. It doesn't matter if it knows it's being rewritten, it's being rewritten. And so what we're able to do is make happy feelings, positivity, financial well-being and wealth, luck, charm, anything really positive, we can turn that up. Anything negative, we can turn it down. Mm-hmm. Like, that's a very, very powerful technique that anybody can access and use. Enjoy.
Thank you. Amazing, amazing. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, come over to YouTube and hear this. Sadhu, I want to say your website and your blogs, each one of those could be an individual show as well. So I think everybody needs to go find you online and learn more. And ideally, fascinating stuff, so masterful in so many disciplines and really very generous to share what you have with us today.
Oh, you're very welcome. I love to be able to give people tools. The only way that this world gets better is if we get better together.
I love that. Thank you for that closing line. And we're going to wish you well until the next time. Sadhu, sending my very best. We really appreciate you being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Be well.
You too.
Well, I don't know about you, but I am feeling quite the high after that conversation, and I'm intrigued to learn more. But for the here and now, this has been Truth Be Told Transformation, looking to transform wherever I can. I'm on every Wednesday with a new episode. Don't forget Robert Hensley, the Minuteman Report, on Mondays at 3, and Tony Sweet, our fearless leader, Fridays at 3. Thanks for listening, and be well, everyone.